Hello, everybody, and welcome. In today's podcast, I want to talk about the sensitive child, and I think a lot of us have got a child who's very sensitive. If you have a sensitive child, you have to deal with them differently. That's all there is to it. They're not like the other ones, they're not as robust emotionally, sometimes not physically, and also perhaps sometimes not mentally. So you really need to make adjustments when you have this child. You just can't treat them like everybody else. That doesn't mean that they won't be disciplined or have boundaries. I don't mean that. I just mean you've just got to give them a little bit more of a wide gate. So the sensitive child is going to be oversensitive about lots of things. For example, emotionally, they will react more. So if the cat dies, or the other kids are out saying, "Oh, that was sad," and kicking the football, and the sensitive child sitting in the corner crying with a picture of the cat, they're very emotionally in touch. Often they're empaths, they're people who are sensitives, and so with that kind of gift, it's also their, I suppose, not curse, but it can make their life more difficult because they feel things just so deeply. This isn't the child to scream at. Do not lose your temper and scream at this child. They'll just crumble. This is a child to sit quietly with and talk to, even when they're upset and maybe misbehaving. You still need to go in a very quiet, calm spot. The child will need also guidance to when they're feeling upset what to do. So you need to listen to them and then find ways to make them feel better. And I think they also need a quiet spot. The sensitive child can't be with people all the time. Often they're introverts, and if your child's an introvert, you really need to take that into consideration. Don't force them to be in front of a crowd if they're uncomfortable with it. They might want to do it, but unless they want to do it, don't force them. Now, sometimes introverts surprise us and they want to, but never force a sensitive child to do things they really are really uncomfortable with. On another note, you'll find that they'll need to be, as I said, on their own and have some time out. They often get involved in things and they'll be very concentrated and very into it. So if they have to finish it, it's okay, let them finish it. All the other things aren't that important. If their dinner's cold tonight, who cares? Sometimes you just have to be flexible with this child. I found that sensitive children also have food sensitivities, unfortunately. So this sensitive child who doesn't want to eat the eggs or doesn't want to eat the seafood, I would listen to them. That's their body talking. Their body always knows. Children's bodies usually know if they have an allergy. So they go two ways. They either don't want to have it or they have too much of it. So a child who's allergic to dairy will be addicted to milk and ice cream, or the child who's allergic to something else, I don't know, seafood, just will never want to touch it. So just watch out because there'll be two ways they do it. If they're sensitive to foods, you'll have to work around that and work out what they are. You can go and have your child tested if you like. However, regardless of that, it'll have to be something you take into consideration because it's going to be awkward when you go out or when you have family meetings where you have food involved, or when they go to people's parties, you might have to say something about they've got an allergy to nuts or whatever it is. It's sort of like a little bit they're allergic to life, I think, sometimes, because I think life's a bit tough for the sensitive child. The sensitive child will also need a little bit more physical loving hugs and kisses, reassurance, a bit more than other children. They often don't have very good self-esteem. They should, but they might not. So you need to work on their self-esteem and tell them what they're good at and encourage them and support them. So if they have to do something and they're nervous to do it, you don't have to make them be strong and you can do this. You're better off just supporting them. And they'll get stronger every time they do it. And then there'll come a time when they go, "You don't have to come with me, I'm okay." This is not the child to force. This is a child to support. I think that if the child is sensitive, there's high possibility that the father or the mother or both are sensitive too, and you'll better know who's who. And sometimes it can be one thing or the other. They don't always go together. Sometimes you'll have an emotionally sensitive parent or emotionally tough parent, and then you might just have a sensitive parent to foods and all different things like pollens and everything, and the other parent's fine. They're not seem to be allergic to anything. Wouldn't that be great? Therefore, you really need to have a look at your family dynamics and see who is and isn't a sensitive one and where that child might have got that from. Sometimes it'll skip. It'll just be skip across and come from the grandparents. So don't forget to have a look at those if you've got a sensitive grandma or grandpa. The sensitive child, I think, is quite an adorable child. Because they're sensitive, they pick up a lot of stuff. They know when you're upset, so don't lie to them, just tell them, yes, I am. They know when things are wrong in the house, if they ask you questions. They know when they go to someone's house if there's something wrong in the house, and they'll say things to you. They know when often people are dodgy, you can't trust them, and they have awareness, or you don't leave them there to be babysat. This child is a child who picks up a lot of stuff, and you will find they're often quite psychic or intuitive children, and they'll come out with things that you don't quite expect. They'll say things to you that are good for you to hear, but you can't really mock them, because they'll often be true and right, even though you might not find it very comfortable in the crowd when the child says something that they don't like you, or I don't like you. If they're 4 or 5, they might say that I don't like you. It's kind of embarrassing. However, you'll probably find this child was right. Just do the normal polite stuff with them. If you have this child too who's sensitive, it's important if they're going to school, they're not being homeschooled, which actually can work quite well for them, homeschooling, I think. However, if they're going to normal school, then you need to talk to the teacher every year, the new teacher, and explain what this child's like, because often the sensitive child has some anxiety too. And it's very important that you communicate with their teachers what this child's like, so that the child is taken care of emotionally in the classroom, and the teacher keeps an eye on them and realizes that their resistance to do something isn't because they're being naughty or misbehaving, it's because they just can't do it, because they're too sensitive and vulnerable, and they can't stand out the front right now and read the book. They're not being naughty. And that's what I want you to understand. A sensitive child isn't usually a naughty child. It's a reticent child. It's a child who's standing back. It's a child who's not comfortable in certain environments because they're so sensitized that they'll pick up too much stuff and they can't cope. Spoil them the way they need to be spoiled. They'll often like different things to other kids in the family and different activities, and see if you can provide that. This is a child who's good to take out on your own. Like if the others are all playing and happily and you go into the shop, ask the child if they want to come too, and then stop and you maybe have a coffee and you buy them an ice cream and you just have some quiet time with them. They're usually not very demanding. They tend to hold back a bit. However, they do need that extra special care. They're sort of like having a precious, I don't know, vase or something, or ornament that you need to take more care of than the others. Encourage you to do that, because they're a different sort of child, and because of also their food sensitivities and their sensitivity to life in general, they'll often have problems sleeping. So they'll need to be not told off, but they'll need to be settled and calmed, and you can lie with them until they go to sleep, or put the light on if they need the light, put the songs on if they need the songs, and they can come into your bed as well if they need to. This is a very different child, and that will need different handling to the others. They'll often be bullied as well, and I think you need to become very aware of that they'll often attract bullies because their energy is light and they look vulnerable. So bullies will attack them in the schoolyard and or in the school room, and you need to be aware that they start to have trouble at school. That's probably bullying, and you might have to go and do something about that. They'll not always tell you either. Sometimes they won't tell you. They seem to get sort of ashamed of being bullied, but it's really not their fault. We know where the problem lies there, and it's with the bully. However, it's something you might need to consider if they're at school, if they're being bullied. I think the sensitive child is a beautiful child. I really do. I love the sensitive child. They come out with the most amazing things that they say to you. They're usually very loving and kind and thoughtful and considerate. However, you can't be heavy-handed with them. That's what I'm trying to say in this podcast. You need to be very soft with them and light in discipline and light in harshness. Don't be harsh with them, and keep an eye on what they're eating and what environments that they're in, because they will actually have a reaction to it. And that's the other thing you might need to look at is if you've been somewhere and they come home and they're cranky and upset, it's probably where you've been or something they've eaten. They're not like a normal, everyday, robust kind of kid. They're a little bit more on the lightest side in terms of what they can handle and what they can't handle. enjoy your sensitive child this week. They're really beautiful little souls. However, they need special treatment, and I want you to give them that special treatment. And I'm sending you lots of love and lots of healing for you and your family.